Commonality of goals is very important, that everybody more or less come at the problem was sort of the same reference level. We view it kind of the same way. We view it differently, but to some degree, but we view it the same way. And the United Nations has helped us do this, as I think back to 2000, when the majority of the countries of the UN met and developed the Millennium Development Goals. And these were 8 goals that were to be accomplished, or hopefully be accomplished, over a 15-year period. And I know you mentioned the countries you're networking with, and when you're talking to them, when you say Millennium Development Goals, you know what they are, they know what they are, and everyone is really on the same page as far as being able to discuss some of the goals they're pushing for. And you mentioned poverty a minute ago. And this is something, we have poverty in the United States, there's poverty in every country of the world to some degree, some worse than others obviously. But how do you reach out and talk about what's going on, let's say in a slum setting in a developing country with your partners, and how do you focus on that as far as working on social integration and trying to get a handle on how you can overcome some of those problems?
Right. Well, I think one of the basic tenets we recognize is the ability to make sure that basic income is there so that people can have a floor of decency in living. And this is still a challenge all over the world, as well as parts of the United States. So how our organizations can work is advocate for continued baseline economic security for our respective countries, but then also some opportunities for people to participate in a civic way, to have projects that benefit groups of populations that are going to be especially vulnerable or hit of course, by poverty. So there are projects in the civic domain that our respective members take great interest in, because we recognize how important having clean water is, and the ability to have access to food, and then when necessary to have some basics in healthcare that we know are relative to immunizations. So some of our groups volunteer on behalf of others in order to make sure that we take care of our countries and others as well.
Which is extremely important. It's very, very important. Now, AARP has been involved with the United Nations, or focusing on this International Year of Older Persons, by setting up a briefing series on global aging. What are some of your briefing series? I know social integration is very important. You've talked about some of the problems, housing, poverty, health, and those types of things. But where are you focusing primarily with the briefings, and who are you involving in the briefings?
Right. We have different topics. Just this past October, we had a special program on caregiving, and we look at it from some of the different countries in terms of different ways that family units and communities are coming together on caring for people who may need assistance as they become more frail. And so many of the countries that are a part of the council, we invite the ambassadors as well as their staff to be a part of this, and we focus on these topics that have best practices that we can learn from each other. And so often, you know, some countries have one advance in one particular topic area from whom we can learn something, and we can share some aspects. For example, here in the United States, one of the topics we focused on is the vibrancy and contribution of older workers, because age discrimination is one of those things that, in terms of the Madrid Plan of making sure that we mitigate this, is an area that we offer other countries on how to retire and work in our retirement.
I'm glad you brought up the Madrid Plan, the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. What exactly is it? It has a fascinating title, and I think it's going to be of great importance to us. What exactly is it?
Well, I think it's our ability to be able to say what are both the needs and the possibilities of contribution. So there are areas of work, there are areas of changing the image of aging, there are aspects of care, there are aspects of health, there are aspects of age participation, much more integrated in society. So it's an area where we try to reframe where aging is. You know, I think in a lot of our cultures at one time, aging was very much a part of the social value of society. And somehow in time, oftentimes that has kind of gotten thin in areas. I think the Madrid Plan starts to put it back together about both the vibrancy, but also addressing the needs that people have to make sure that we as a global society are committed to it, are prepared for making the readiness actions that we have to do, and that we execute on them so that our future generations will benefit from the well-being for those of us who are aging together.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said age participation. Tell me exactly what we're talking about. Are you talking about people of all ages or seniors participating in all types of activities, educational activities, work activities, retirement activities, health, and across the board? Or what are we talking about in that area?
Sure. I think, you know, we have an art of knowing that some of us as we age will have particular needs. As I mentioned a little earlier, that is fine to understand that, but to not have a firm firewall perimeter around it, but that we're part of it, participating in families, working to bring in income sometimes. Oftentimes studies show that grandparents do that, so they're not always passive recipients. And the same thing with children. Children are a part of it by helping, as we said in our conference, they're teaching us how to get connected to the internet age in ways that we may not. So there's a much more transactional approach. It's not passive, but it's much more integrative. And so that's something that I would say is just an important concept. It isn't just vertical in one direction. It is much more integrative, and therefore you don't feel the sense of isolation, and that you also recognize that people have more to give and participate in. And when we do, I think our mental health is better, our grandchildren learn from us. So I think we need to get back in many ways to many of the societies that our member nations had at one time. That was probably the healthiest ecosystem for a society that we can build on.
Mm-hmm. So what you're trying to do is get away from that vertical stereotyping, or stovepiping as the common phrase is today, stovepiping people and putting them in a certain category and leaving them there, but have them more actively involved and integrate them into a variety of different sources, which is extremely important.
And let me give you one example that's amazing. AARP, as I said, was started in 1958, more than 50 years ago. Our founder, Dr. Andrus, was 73 years old when she founded the organization. So, you know, oftentimes people say, well, at 60, you know, you're done. But here she was 73 and starting this organization, and went and knocked on doors to make sure that people could have access to health insurance. She, at the age of early 70s, she was doing this, and just shows you the vibrancy and possibility that people have.
We didn't want to start off the program by stereotyping who an older person was, so we waited till the end. Who is an older person?
I think an older person is a person from the day they get born. And so I think we need to reframe our thinking that, you know, we age from the time we're born, and we've heard that. But I think what we need to help begin to see is that as we meet people, whether they physically have features as I do, gray hair and wrinkles, that hopefully people still see in my eyes that even though I am probably chronologically older, I have something inside that I very much want to both share and learn with you, whether you're chronologically older than I or chronologically younger. So I think we have work to do together as a society to make sure that we reframe what contribution in society is about, and that's the dignity of participation and engagement. So I don't want to define an age, but it's the fact that hopefully we use our age and our knowledge to participate, to contribute, and to benefit.
That is a perfect way to end our program. It's exactly the best way to do it. And we didn't define an older person per se. We'll let the viewers define who an older person is, if they fall into that category. And she mentioned from the time we're born, we're moving towards old age, and that's exactly what is happening. Well, you're doing some great work with AARP, and it's of great interest to our viewers and to people not only in the United States, but all around the world, because we are reaching that point. And if our viewers would like more information, they can go to www.aarp.org, or they could Google AARP and they can come up with more information. But again, Jennie Chen Hansen, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.